Daniel Cross lived in a mansion filled with silence. 2 years had passed since the night his wife, Evelyn, was declared dead in a car crash. He had buried her, mourned her, and tried to bury the grief beneath money and success, but every empty corridor whispered her name. At a charity gala downtown, where champagne glasses clinked and cameras flashed, a frail homeless girl with tangled hair slipped past the guards. She didn't beg, she didn't steal, she simply whispered into his ear, "Your wife is still alive." Then she vanished into the crowd before he could ask anything. The words cut deeper than any wound. Daniel could not sleep that night. He replayed the girl's voice over and over in his head. His mind, always logical, rejected it. Evelyn's body had been found, the funeral had been real. Yet, a part of him, the part that still woke up expecting her beside him, wanted desperately to believe. He began searching through old files of the accident. He paid off the police officer who had handled the case, but the man became nervous when asked about certain missing photographs. A few documents were marked confidential, sealed away, though they shouldn't have been. Daniel smelled a cover-up. He hired discreet investigators, telling no one of his quest, not even his business partners. The homeless girl appeared again, sitting on the steps outside a church, and this time Daniel caught her arm. Her name was Maya. She told him about a woman she had seen at a shelter a year after Evelyn's supposed death. The woman was refined, clearly out of place among the homeless, but she stayed a few nights, never giving her real name. Maya swore it was Evelyn, same face, same gentle voice. Daniel didn't know if she was lying, delusional, or telling the truth, but the fire in Maya's eyes was convincing. Driven by obsession, Daniel traced Evelyn's jewelry. Most of her belongings had been claimed by her family, but one item shocked him. A pawn shop downtown carried a wedding ring identical to hers. The pawn slip showed it had been sold not long ago, long after her death certificate was signed. He held the ring in his hand, shaking. The season closes on Daniel staring at the ring under the dim light of his study, his heart racing. Every certainty he had built for 2 years crumbled in that moment. For the first time since the funeral, he whispered aloud, "Evelyn, if you're out there, I will find you." Daniel's world no longer felt steady. The wedding ring on his desk was proof that Evelyn had lived beyond the night she was supposed to have died. It gnawed at him day and night. He told no one, not even his closest confidants, because if Evelyn was alive, then someone had buried the truth on purpose, and anyone around him could be involved. He began moving quietly, paying for information in cash, asking questions only in whispers. He hired a private investigator under a false name, a man who specialized in tracing people who didn't want to be found. Together, they combed through records, bank slips, security footage. Slowly, a faint trail began to emerge. Evelyn's old accounts had been touched months after her death. Small withdrawals, carefully placed, as if someone wanted to stay invisible but still needed the money. Maya, the homeless girl, became his unlikely ally. Daniel would find her on street corners, and though she lived with little, her memory was sharp. She recalled the night she saw Evelyn at the shelter, a pale woman with haunted eyes, carrying a scarf Evelyn once wore. Maya remembered details only someone who had truly seen her could know. Daniel's heart told him it was no fantasy. As weeks passed, fragments came together. In one abandoned police report, the date of Evelyn's accident didn't align with the hospital's admission records. Someone had rewritten the timeline. When Daniel confronted the investigator who first handled the case, the man warned him to leave the past buried. His hands trembled when he said, "Some things are bigger than you, Mr. Cross." That only hardened Daniel's resolve. The first real breakthrough came one late night when Daniel was handed a grainy CCTV recording. The footage showed a crowded train station. Among the passengers, a woman walked briskly with her head down, scarf covering her face. But for 1 second she glanced up at the camera. Daniel froze. The eyes, the way she held herself, it was Evelyn. The time stamp was from 8 months ago, 2 years after she was supposed to be gone. Daniel replayed the footage 100 times. Relief, anger, confusion, all clashed within him. If she was alive, why hadn't she come home? Who was she running from? Or worse, was she running from him? The season ends with Daniel sitting alone in the darkness of his study, the blurry still image of Evelyn on the screen before him. His pulse raced as a single thought consumed him: she hadn't vanished by chance. Someone had hidden her, and he was going to tear apart the world until he knew why. Daniel no longer lived for business meetings or boardroom battles. Every ounce of his energy was consumed by one pursuit, Evelyn. The blurry image from the station had become his obsession, pinned on his study wall, studied under every light, memorized like scripture. He began to notice things he had overlooked before, the faint shadow of men trailing her in the footage, the way she glanced behind her as though hunted. She wasn't simply hiding, she was being chased. His investigator returned with troubling findings. In the weeks before Evelyn's disappearance, she had accessed files from Daniel's private company archives, documents tied to international contracts. Buried in those files were links to offshore accounts, shell companies, and names of men Daniel had done business with but never fully trusted. Suddenly, a sickening thought struck him: had Evelyn uncovered something she wasn't supposed to? Was her death less about tragedy and more about silencing her? One evening, Daniel confronted an old business associate, hoping for answers. The man laughed nervously and said too much. He hinted that Evelyn had stumbled onto a conspiracy that stretched beyond Daniel's empire: money laundering, smuggling, corruption at levels Daniel had only brushed against. She knew too much, the man whispered, his eyes darting around the restaurant. That's why she had to disappear. When Daniel pressed further, the man abruptly excused himself and vanished, leaving behind only fear. The threats began soon after. Anonymous letters slipped under Daniel's door, warning him to stop digging. A car followed him late at night, headlights lingering in his rearview mirror. Maya was attacked one evening near the shelter, left bruised and terrified. She told Daniel through trembling lips, "They know you're looking for her. They know I've seen her." Daniel's rage hardened into resolve. Whoever they were, they had crossed a line. And then, just as despair threatened to consume him, the phone rang. It was late, the city silent outside his windows. He almost didn't answer, but something compelled him. He lifted the receiver, and for a long moment there was only static. Then he heard it, a voice he knew better than his own heartbeat. "Daniel," Evelyn whispered, her tone urgent, broken. "Don't look for me, please. It's not safe." The line went dead before he could speak. He clutched the phone to his ear long after the silence settled in. His wife was alive, she was close enough to call. And she was begging him not to save her. That night, Daniel stared out across the glittering skyline of the city he once thought he owned. For the first time, he realized he was not in control. Forces larger than wealth or power had ensnared Evelyn, and now him. But there was no turning back. Daniel began to look at everyone around him with suspicion. The phone call had confirmed Evelyn was alive, but the fear in her voice told him something worse, that someone close to him was working against them. He started testing people, slipping false details into conversations, waiting to see what would return to him in the form of threats. Within weeks, the circle of trust he had once built around himself crumbled. His world of polished deals and polished friends suddenly reeked of lies. He turned first to Evelyn's best friend, Clara, a woman who had wept beside him at the funeral, who had comforted him like a sister. In the past she had been loyal to Evelyn beyond measure, and Daniel never questioned her grief. But when he confronted her late one evening, laying down the evidence, the pawned ring, the surveillance footage, Clara's composure cracked. Her hands shook as she admitted Evelyn had come to her the night of the accident. Evelyn was terrified, begging Clara for money and help to leave the city. Clara claimed she had thought it was madness, that Evelyn was unraveling under pressure, but when Daniel pressed harder, she confessed she had driven Evelyn to a safe house. Clara swore she didn't know more, but her silence for 2 years was betrayal enough. Meanwhile, Maya's life grew more dangerous. A van followed her from the shelter one night, and she barely escaped when strangers tried to corner her in an alley. She was young, fragile, and homeless, yet she was being hunted for the simple crime of telling the truth. Daniel moved her into a secure apartment under guard, realizing she had become a target because of him. Protecting her gave him a grim sense of responsibility. She was now the only living witness who could place Evelyn alive after her supposed death. As Daniel pulled harder at the threads, he uncovered another shocking truth. Evelyn had traveled under a different name, with a passport that wasn't hers. The photograph was unmistakable, but the name was foreign. The date of issue was after her death. Someone powerful had helped her vanish. The walls closed in tighter. Daniel felt eyes on him at every turn, waiters lingering too long near his table, strangers in suits outside his building, his phone ringing with calls that hung up the moment he answered. Even his own security team, men he had trusted for years, began to look suspect. The paranoia grew heavy, suffocating, until it settled into certainty. The conspiracy wasn't only outside his walls. It had wormed its way inside his life, his home, perhaps even his family. The season closes with Daniel sitting in his office, the fake passport in one hand, his revolver in the other. He no longer knew who was lying to him, who was helping him, or who wanted him dead. Only one truth remained unshakable: Evelyn was alive, and if he had to burn down every bridge in his world to bring her back, he would. Daniel could no longer contain his search within the city. The false passport had given him his first real trail, a lead that stretched far beyond borders. It showed Evelyn leaving under the identity of Elena Weiss, with stamps across Europe. The dates told a story of flight and fear, each move happening within weeks of strange threats Daniel had received at home. Whoever hunted her was relentless, and she was always just one step ahead. He boarded a plane to Paris under an assumed name, abandoning his company to trusted deputies. His wealth became a weapon now: cash in envelopes, bribes for clerks, payments for scraps of information. Paris gave him his first glimpse of her recent life. A cafe owner remembered a woman with Evelyn's face who came in every morning for black coffee, always sitting near the back door. She carried a small leather notebook and watched the entrance as though expecting danger. The owner said she left one day without a word and never returned. From Paris, the trail led him to Istanbul. The city's chaos mirrored the turmoil inside him. In the bazaars and narrow alleys, Daniel bribed informants, following whispers of a foreign woman who stayed in cheap rooms under fake names. He found one such room, long abandoned, but inside the drawer was a torn page from Evelyn's leather notebook. On it were names and numbers, many of them familiar, rivals from Daniel's own business empire. It was no coincidence. She had been chasing the same corruption he was beginning to uncover. The more he traveled, the closer danger crept. Men in dark coats appeared on train platforms, watching him. Twice he was nearly struck down, once when his car's brakes failed on a mountain road, another when gunmen stormed a hotel lobby where he was staying. Each time, he barely escaped, driven forward by the ghost of Evelyn's face in his memory. Finally, his search carried him into Eastern Europe, to a desolate border town where refugees and fugitives passed through unseen. There, in a crowded market, Daniel saw her. For one fleeting second, across a sea of strangers, a woman turned her head, and his heart stopped. Her eyes were unmistakable. It was Evelyn. He shouted her name, pushing through the crowd, but she moved quickly, slipping between stalls. He followed desperately, shoving past vendors and travelers, but by the time he reached the far end of the market, she was gone, swallowed by the city like smoke. Daniel stood in the middle of the street, his chest heaving, the echo of her presence burning into him. She had been there, alive, close enough to touch, yet still just beyond his reach. The season ends with Daniel alone in a foreign city, the sky heavy with storm clouds. For the first time, he realized Evelyn wasn't simply running from the syndicate, she was also running from him. And the question he dreaded most gnawed at him in the silence: was she trying to survive, or was she trying to disappear forever? The market encounter haunted Daniel for weeks. He replayed every moment, every glimpse of her face, until his investigator finally found another lead. In a border village, tucked between mountains, there were whispers of a foreign woman who paid in cash, never stayed in one place more than a few nights, and always kept her curtains drawn. Daniel followed the trail with a quiet desperation, his heart pounding with equal measures of fear and longing. One rain-soaked evening, he found the house. A crumbling stone cottage on the edge of the village, its windows dim, smoke barely rising from the chimney. He knocked once, twice, then pushed the door open when no one answered. And there she was. Evelyn stood in the shadows, thinner, older, her hair tied back, her eyes wide with disbelief. For a heartbeat, time collapsed, and Daniel forgot everything: the lies, the distance, the pain. She was alive, and she was in front of him. But joy was fleeting. Evelyn pulled away when he reached for her. She spoke quickly, her voice trembling. She told him the truth he had feared all along. She hadn't died because of an accident, she had fled because she had uncovered something dangerous. The syndicate Daniel had unknowingly brushed against in his empire was darker and more powerful than he imagined. They controlled ports, banks, even governments. Evelyn had stumbled onto their secrets while reviewing contracts and realized they would kill her if she didn't disappear. Her death had been the only way to protect herself, and to protect him. Daniel struggled to breathe as she revealed the names she had uncovered, people he dined with, shook hands with, trusted. They're inside your world, Daniel, she said, her voice breaking. If they knew I told you, they would come for both of us. The reunion was raw, filled with anger and love tangled together. Daniel demanded to know why she hadn't trusted him, why she had left him to grieve. Evelyn's tears fell as she explained that loving him had made her weak, and weakness would have cost them both their lives. Daniel's fury melted into desperation. He had found her, and he would never let her go again. But fate was cruel. That very night, men stormed the village. Evelyn's safe house was compromised. Glass shattered, doors splintered, and Daniel fought with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed, but it wasn't enough. Evelyn was taken before his eyes, dragged into a van as gunfire echoed through the streets. Daniel, bloodied and beaten, stumbled after them but collapsed in the mud, powerless to stop it. The season closes with Daniel on his knees in the rain, his hands clawing at the earth as the van disappeared into the night. He had finally found Evelyn, only to lose her again. But now there was no turning back. This wasn't just about finding her anymore, it was war. Daniel's grief turned into something sharper, something unrecognizable even to himself. The night Evelyn was torn from him a second time, something inside him broke, and what replaced it was colder than rage. He had played the desperate husband long enough. Now he would play the hunter. He returned to his empire, but no longer as the grieving millionaire. He liquidated assets, pulled strings, and gathered intelligence. Men who once worked as his bodyguards, investigators, and fixers were given a new mission: destroy the syndicate piece by piece. He recruited hackers, mercenaries, and even street-level contacts through Maya, who had learned to survive in the shadows of the city. Together they formed a network Evelyn herself might have built, a family stitched together by loyalty and desperation. Daniel began leaking documents Evelyn had collected, funneling them through journalists and whistleblowers. Quietly at first, then louder, the syndicate's corruption was exposed. Shell companies collapsed, accounts froze, allies turned on each other. But the more he pushed, the harder they struck back. His company's board tried to oust him. His mansion was firebombed. Every day was a war on multiple fronts, and every night he dreamed of Evelyn chained somewhere in the dark. Maya proved invaluable. She could slip into places Daniel could not: shelters, back alleys, the hidden underbelly of the city where information traveled faster than money. Through her, Daniel uncovered rumors of a secret prison run by the syndicate, where high-value captives were kept. Every fragment of intel pointed to Evelyn being held there, a bargaining chip in a game far larger than both of them. The closer he got, the more dangerous it became. Friends died, allies betrayed him, men he once trusted revealed their true loyalties with knives in their hands. Daniel's world grew narrower, stripped of comfort and illusion, until all that was left was his will to fight. His fortune dwindled, his power fractured, but his determination only hardened. At last, after months of fire and blood, he struck. His team raided the hidden compound deep in the mountains. The night was filled with explosions and gunfire, men screaming in languages Daniel barely understood. And in the chaos, he found her. Evelyn, frail but unbroken, chained in a cell. When he pulled her into his arms, it felt like redemption, yet he knew it wasn't over. Because in the shadows of that burning compound, he glimpsed the man who had orchestrated everything, the syndicate's true leader. Their eyes met for a single, electrifying moment before the man vanished into the smoke. The season closes with Daniel and Evelyn staggering into the night, alive but scarred, the compound collapsing behind them. For the first time, they were together again, but the war was not finished. One enemy remained, and he would not rest until the last thread of the syndicate was cut. Daniel and Evelyn's return from the mountain compound felt less like victory and more like a temporary reprieve. They were alive, yes, but the war was unfinished, and they both knew the syndicate would not stop hunting them. Their love was no longer a private bond but a weapon the enemy would use against them. Every safe house felt temporary, every quiet moment laced with the knowledge that the man who had orchestrated their suffering still walked free. In the weeks that followed, Daniel and Evelyn gave testimony to investigative journalists and international courts. Documents Evelyn had risked everything to gather were released, splintering the syndicate's influence. Governments that had once looked the other way were forced into action. Headlines around the world shouted about corruption, laundering, disappearances. The empire of shadows began to collapse. Yet, Daniel knew the faceless leader, the man he had glimpsed in the smoke, remained untouched. As long as he lived, the threat endured. Maya's role grew clearer in those days. One evening, Evelyn confessed something she had kept hidden from Daniel. Maya was her half-sister. Years earlier, Evelyn's father had abandoned a second family, leaving Maya to grow up on the streets. Evelyn had always known of her existence but carried guilt she never acted on. It was no accident that Maya had recognized her. Blood had drawn her into the storm. The revelation cut through Daniel like a blade, for the girl who had sparked everything was not a stranger but family. With Maya's street connections, Daniel tracked whispers of the syndicate's last stronghold. The leader had vanished into anonymity, moving like a ghost between cities. But eventually, patterns emerged: a secluded estate on the coast, guarded as if it housed a king. Daniel prepared as though it would be his final act. He knew there would be no retreat, no diplomacy. This was a reckoning. The night of the assault came with rain and thunder, as if the world itself demanded an ending. Daniel, Evelyn, and Maya moved with their small team, every step a reminder of the lives already lost. Inside the estate, shadows turned to gunfire, corridors lit with violence. Daniel pressed forward, refusing to stop, until he stood face to face with the man who had torn his life apart. The leader was not a stranger. He was someone Daniel had once trusted, a partner in business, a friend who had smiled across boardroom tables. Betrayal struck deeper than bullets. It was always about control, the man sneered. Evelyn chose the wrong side. And so did you. The final confrontation was brutal, not fought only with weapons but with the weight of years stolen. In the end, Daniel killed him with his own hands, an act that left him shaking, emptied of rage, emptied of everything except Evelyn's embrace. When the storm cleared, they stood among ruins. The syndicate had been broken, its leader silenced. Courts and governments would deal with the remnants, but the war was over. For the first time in years, Daniel and Evelyn could breathe without fear. Maya, once a forgotten girl on the streets, stood with them, no longer alone, but part of a family bound by fire and survival. The story closes quietly. Daniel and Evelyn returned not to their mansion of glass and marble but to a modest home by the sea. They had lost wealth, friends, even years of their lives, but in the end, they had found something unbreakable. Evelyn's hand in his was enough. And as the waves rolled endlessly against the shore, Daniel whispered the words that had driven him through every trial. I found you. And this time, I will never let go.